Well, hey, everybody. Who was that cartoon used to say that? Fat Albert. That was one of my favorite cartoons when I was a kid. Fat Albert. Hey. So you young people have to Google that to figure out what Fat Albert was. Has nothing to do with today's devotion, but it just popped in my mind. All right, we are in Exodus chapter 13 today. And as you're opening your Bible, just want to remind everybody that this coming Sunday, not only Sunday evening at 5 do we have the evening of worship, the night of worship that I talked about yesterday, but Sunday morning I'm going to be teaching on baptism and public profession of faith. Just some Bible teaching on why baptism matters and answering some questions about baptism. So you pray for that service and invite some people to come who need not only to be baptized, but need a relationship with Jesus because they're going to hear the gospel. All right, chapter 13, a couple of questions I want to clear up for you before I get into the devotional thought for today. One of the questions is in verse 4 of chapter 14. Some of you may have noticed this. Says, on this day in the month of Abib, you are about to go forth. You may recall yesterday I talked about Passover being in the Hebrew month, the Jewish month, their calendar of Nisan, the first month of the Hebrew year. But here's Abib. What's going on? Is this a contradiction? No, it's not. All it is this. So listen up. In ancient Hebrew, they referred to the first month of the year as Abib. You jump ahead a few centuries, and they're taken into captivity in Babylon. And then after 70 years, returned to the promised land. When they came back from Babylonian captivity, they changed the name from Abib, however you want to say it, pronounced different ways, to Nisan. That's all that's going on here. So I want to point that out. And then another thing I wanted to explain that may have been a question in the back of some of your minds is verses 11 to 14. So let's read those together. He says, now when the Lord brings you to the land of the Canaanite as he swore to your fathers and he gives it to you. So once you all make it to the promised land after the Exodus, not now, but once you get there, he says, in verse 12, you shall devote to the Lord the first offspring of every womb. First offspring of every womb. And the first offspring of every beast that you own. The males belong to the Lord. So the first male sheep, the first male horse, the first male son, whatever it is to be devoted to the Lord. What? Sacrificed. Now, hang with me. Not just committed to, but sacrificed to the Lord. Verse 13, but every first offspring of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. Sacrifice a lamb in place of the donkey. But if you do not redeem it, you don't sacrifice a lamb in place of that first male donkey, he says, you shall break its neck. And every firstborn of man, firstborn son of every man, among your sons you shall redeem. And it shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is this? Then you shall say to him, with a powerful hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, from the house of slavery. And it came about when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go that the Lord killed every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore, I sacrifice to the Lord the males, the first offspring of every womb, but every firstborn of my sons I'll redeem. And it's a sign in verse 16. Now, remember, the 10th plague, the powerful hand of God that eventually caused Pharaoh to let them go, was the firstborn son of every Egyptian and the firstborn male animal. They all died. And to commemorate that, the firstborn of lambs and so on, the firstborn son of every Hebrew as they go forward and get home, get to the promised land, is to be sacrificed to remind them of what God did in Egypt to free them. Now, God doesn't want them literally sacrificing their son, so what do? They redeem, just like they redeem the donkey with the lamb, they redeem their son. To redeem is to buy back. So there was a price paid in place of the son to symbolize the sacrifice of the firstborn son. When you read the rest of the Old Testament and Jewish history, they paid a sum of money. A sum of money was paid to the priest to redeem the firstborn son. And that was to become another teaching moment to say, so I have a son, and then I redeem that son, not by sacrificing him, but by giving that money in place of sacrificing him. Then as he's older and ask about it, I'm able to say, hey, here's what God did down in Egypt to free us. And so that's why they have this process, and that's what's going on here. I hope that helps. It's similar to here it talks about the firstborn belongs to the Lord, but also in the Old Testament, it talks a lot about the tithe belongs to God. The first 10% of your salary belongs to God. Same way the firstborn son, the same way the firstborn animal. And think about Jesus. God so loved the world in John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave what? His only begotten son. Do you see the consistency of all this? Okay. Now, my devotional thought from this chapter is found in verses 21 and 22, the end of the chapter. They are leaving Egypt. They're on their way to the Red Sea. And in chapter 13, verse 21, the Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. And he did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. What an image. It's hard for me to fathom, to really imagine what it must have been like. This massive pillar of fire in the evening and this large pillar of cloud during the day. God with them on their journey to the promised land, guiding them, protecting them, providing for them, with them the entire way. Wow, wow. How moving that must have been. Whenever you watch the classic movie with Charlton Heston as Moses, the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments, the scene as they approach the sea and the pillar of cloud, and the pillar of fire, it's a very spectacular scene. If you've never seen that movie, and some of you young ones probably haven't, I encourage you to watch it. Now, you got to have about 3 hours because it's not a short movie, but it is spectacular. So what does that mean for me? Well, God was with them and he led them. You and I have the promise in both the Old and New Testaments that as the followers of Jesus, we will never be alone. He said, I will never leave you and forsake you. When he gave the Great Commission, he said, I will be with you always to the end of the age. Once you have Jesus in your life, you become a follower of Jesus. You are never, never alone. God is always there, and he will never leave you. Now, it may not be as dramatic as looking out and seeing a pillar of fire or a pillar, of clouds, but his presence is just as real, and just as permanent. He leads us, guides us. I think that's why it's important for you and me to cultivate our awareness of the presence of God. Things that help me cultivate an awareness of God's presence is spending time alone with God. The Bible reading plan and D groups and all of that help me cultivate that awareness that he's with me. Time to meditate and reflect. I think our culture pushes us to always be doing something, to be busy. And that's why Uh, we complain sometimes about not having time to do nothing, but what do? We turn on the television, we turn on music because the idea of silence just freaks some of us out. We need times of silence to meditate and reflect so we can hear the voice of God. That helps me cultivate an awareness of the presence of God. Journaling, writing in my journal from a D group helps me cultivate an awareness of the presence of God. Listening to worship music. I love to listen to instrumental worship music when I study. Listening to worship music helped me be aware of the presence of God. And this may surprise you, but I think evangelism and witnessing and inviting people to church does that, because I have learned that when I'm talking to people about Jesus, that I'm on the front lines of spiritual warfare, and nothing makes me more aware of the presence of God than that as I see him work. So I want you to know that just as God in this pillar of fire and pillar of a cloud was with the Jewish people and their Exodus experience, God is with you. Cultivate your awareness of his presence. It will be such a blessing in your life. Well, that's the word for today. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at chapter 14. God bless you, everybody. And remember, be praying for Sunday's sermon as I teach on baptism and public profession of faith. And then join us 5 o'clock Sunday night for our evening of worship. You're going to be blessed.